I'm Sarah Ludmer. I am a dietitian by trade. Went to Penn State. If there's any good Penn Staters out there, if you're a there you go. If you're a Michigan or Ohio State fan, you can go ahead and leave if you would like. No, I'm kidding.
We are.
Penn State, that's right. Did that for about 10 years, practiced clinically, and then moved into the food industry in 2009. And I worked at Del Monte Foods for about 5 years, and then I came to Kellogg. And couldn't be more excited to be a part of this today, and everything that Leanne is saying, and love the information and the direction of the Advantage program that Dan described, because I do think we are on a little breaking point of how we can really start to be able to integrate both health and wellness metrics and initiatives with these sustainability initiatives. So today I come to you actually as the Chief Wellbeing and Sustainable Business Officer. That's a long title, I know. But what it does is it starts to trigger to industry that we need to fold these two areas together in order to be successful. And that's the heart of what I want to get after today is how do we continue to make that connection? Whether it's connection with experts, whether it's connection like we are today with academia, government, and industry, and whether that's connection across sustainability, health, economics, whatever it might be. So before I jump into that, I do want to just make sure everybody knows who WK Kellogg Co. is, because the Kellogg company actually doesn't exist anymore. On October 2nd, the Kellogg company that you maybe have known all your life globally and or here in the US actually turned into two separate, completely separate, publicly traded companies. What they did, if you're familiar with the Kellogg company, they technically took out the US, Canadian, and Caribbean cereal businesses, and that business became WK Kellogg Co. The rest of what you know about Kellogg, all of our snacking brands that exist like Pop-Tarts, Pringles, Cheez-It, and all of our global businesses, that company is now called Kellanova. So I just wanted to make sure all you guys knew. Now you have some good trivia to take home to your friends. But that was a really big change. And what it helped WK Kellogg Co. do is actually go back to our roots. So if anybody has watched the History Channel on the foods built in America, you'll hear the WK Kellogg story, right? And he truly was somebody that was focused on health and well-being, environmental stewardship, and philanthropy. Everything he did actually really tied to all three of those things, and that's why my role got created, and it's at the heart of what we want to do as now the North American cereal business. So how do we go about doing that? This was brought up a little bit by Leanne. This definition from FAO has existed since 2010, so it's not new, right? What I want you to pay attention to is it has all these different aspects that are important for a sustainable, healthy diet. Nowhere in that definition does it say or. It says and. The problem is we've been attacking each of these as or, right? We've been doing incredible health and well-being programs. We've been doing incredible work around sustainability, soil health, GHG emissions, all of these things. And we've been doing programs around economics and hunger-free and all of those things. But we are just starting to actually turn this into an and. And that's what I really want to kind of talk to you today is how do we get this to go faster? I think there's 3 ways we can do it. I'll share with you some of the things that are happening across the industry that I think are really excellent work. You won't see a lot of WK Kellogg Co. stuff there because we just started literally October 2nd. But I did want to highlight some of my other fellow manufacturers that are doing some great work. I will call out, though, where I think there's been some gaps or where that overlap hasn't happened yet. The other thing I want to call out is this shift that industry needs to do, but honestly, even academia, because everywhere we have to be thinking about these aspects of ESG and shift them into thinking about being a sustainable business or a sustainable economy in general. So I'll give you a little insight there that I think is also a good reason why I think it's a tipping point right now that we have this chance to make this change. And then lastly, this will kind of just be filtered through all, but I think I'm going to highlight a few really good examples where I think they're really building diverse coalitions and partnerships. And what I mean by that is they're pulling together all those different 3 pieces and all of those experts. I think we heard yesterday someone said they're leaving out the ologists, right, for one of the conversations. How do we not do that? So let's look at some good work. As it relates to regenerative agriculture, there are so many companies doing awesome stuff. I wanted to highlight these two because as global organizations, they are phenomenally committing themselves and really, really creating some really great work. PepsiCo committed in 2021 to do 7 million acres. That's a significant amount of land that they are hoping to have regenerative agriculture. And they even have a lasered focus aspect on oats. Everybody knows the Quaker brand within there. And they're really looking to make sure oats can be best grown, whether that's through sourcing, whether that's efficiency of how much water usage, any of those types of things. Unilever, also another phenomenal program. It's called From the Ground Up. Similar types of commitments, but why I put Unilever up here as well is because they actually created one of the first regenerative soil practices, like principles outline. And you might say, why is Unilever developing that? Shouldn't somebody else be developing that? Well, the problem was there really wasn't any good definition of what regenerative agriculture is. So Unilever said, hey, we're going to figure this out if we're going to start measuring ourselves against this. And they created one of the first documents to do that. Other companies were doing it too, don't get me wrong, but they were the one I think really had it set up for success. What I will say across both of these, even in the regenerative agricultural practices, there wasn't a lot of ways for them to measure nutritional quality and or nutrient content impacts of any of the efforts that they were doing. So there's that little gap, right? Huge, great technical experts establishing what those sustainability or environmental, I should say, metrics should be, but not quite getting there on the nutrition side of it and or what the cost implications might be. The other really awesome group, so we were actually a part of this, now you can see Kellanova is a part of this, is the Midwest Row Crop Collaborative. There's lots of different coalitions that have been doing this where they're gathering like-minded groups to find a topic of interest and then create that initiative that can create great outcomes. The project that Kellanova and Walmart partnered on was to help with our rice farmers because rice obviously uses a lot of water. So we wanted to find more ways to be able to grow that crop more sustainably. Why I really wanted to highlight them particularly is you can't be a member unless you're going to actually do a program. So they're really trying to, drive people to action versus say, well, I'm a member of the coalition, but not really be putting their money where their mouth is. The other group is the SAI, which I'm going to look at my notes for a second because I love their purpose statement. Their purpose is to harness the pre-competitive power of members to accelerate the widespread adoption of sustainable agricultural practices. I love that pre-competitive word. Oh my God, I know I'm an industry person. You should think I want to be competitive, right? But when it comes to this stuff, we have to stop trying to compete against each other because this is about the well-being of people on our planet, right? And so what SAI did is they recognized what Unilever already saw. They decided, look at the date on this, guys, in September of 2023, so just a few months ago, that there needed to be a global framework to regenerative agriculture. So that was just published in September. So talk about young, new science, right? But now all of these organizations, many of the ones that have great programs, now have a consistent set of metrics to be going after with any of their initiatives. I promise you this is my only squinty eye slide, but I threw it up here, A, because I know you guys like data, but secondly, because what I also liked about what they did to pull this together is it's outcomes-based, right? So not just a metric, but what are all the outcomes we're trying to go after? There was metrics on soil, metrics on water, metrics on biodiversity and climate. What's missing? Nutritional quality. So they did this incredible report, but there wasn't, if I go back for a second, there wasn't a member like an ILSI or like a nutritional science group that said, hey, what might those metrics be that we also need to be paying attention to? Not to necessarily change what the soil health program might be, but just to be monitoring and maybe identify a loophole or maybe identify an opportunity, right? So I went through all of the environmental things, but let's talk about health and well-being too, because there's a lot going on there, right? We know the health of the American population is not great. Dietary guidelines, that'll be coming up soon. And I loved how the Advantage program is now starting to look at the sustainability side so that dietary guidelines can continue to have that focus, but we'll listen to some of those outcomes and we'll start to see that overlap. So just love that that's, for being able to see that that's transitioning in the right direction. There's a couple other regulatory things that are happening. There was a proposed definition of healthy, and there's also been front-of-pack labeling. That no proposed definition yet, but lots of different testing to see, will any of these systems work? The hard part with either of these, and or looking at ultra-processed foods and the NOVA score, is we don't really think about what it might mean from an environmental or a sustainability standpoint. Food waste, we have to think about that. When we look at our nutritional health by ultra-processed foods, it's going to shift people more to that fresh piece, and will there be more food waste? How will it start to impact some of the great work we heard happening yesterday on cellular agriculture if we're looking at processed being an indicator of negative health outcomes? So we really, even in our nutrition world, where I love being, we have to start putting on what are those cost implications, food waste implications, farmer implications, food safety implications of systems even like this that might shift how people perceive some of the packaged goods that exist today. One note, as we looked at some of the early talks on front-of-pack labeling, there were many WIC foods that would actually carry a high in. And that starts to get scary because we know WIC is one of the best food as medicine programs that looks at cost of goods, nutritional quality, and everything else. So we have to think about all of those, even as we're looking at some of the health side of it, too. And then there's industry. Oh, is this a build? Oh, it is, sorry. So these are a whole bunch of stats. Now, I did pull these. These are WK Kellogg Co. stats as it relates to the health and well-being of our portfolio. I didn't bring this to go start to brag about Kellogg. What I brought it forward to show you is that every single company has these somewhere in their CSR report. They can show you what they've improved as it relates to their portfolio, and they've done a ton of great work. I do believe industry is trying their best to actually put forward their best foot. There's also just as many of these as it relates to our environmental impacts, right? Sustainable packaging, scope 1 and 2, all of those things. What I would say us as industry aren't good at doing is we haven't figured out an indicator that crosses all three and that's consistent across any of our companies, right? So while we're all doing a fantastic job at delivering each of these, and each of us probably have different areas of more focus, we still haven't even landed it there. And if we think about all of these things, you really have to start to consider whether we're ever going to fulfill the FAO definition, right? If we keep acting that siloed or forgetting that that's there, we're only ever going to make each of these petals even better, but we're never going to hit that center of sustainable diets. But you guys have seen lots of good news because it does look like we're moving that direction. The key pieces that I want to make sure you guys all think about, no matter what you're doing, is what metric am I missing, right? So these were just clips of kind of what I showed you, and the sustainability ones aren't doing a lot on nutrition or cost metrics, and the nutrition ones aren't doing a lot on environmental waste and or cost metrics as well. So what needs to happen? How many of you have heard of ESG? Okay. How many that raised your hands feel like you really know what ESG is? Okay, I see like one or two. Yep. So that's a problem to some extent. What I will say is ESG right now is kind of a dirty word. I hate to say that out loud, but it really is in the political landscape. But what I really want you to understand and know, that ESG was actually established back in, I believe it's 2010 or 2004, one of the two. It was actually established by the United Nations. And what ESG stands for is environmental, social governance, okay? So what it did was it laid out for companies, it said, if you are gonna be a financially viable company in the future and you are gonna operate ethically, You need to make sure that your company is paying attention to your impact on the environment, your impact on people's health and or the communities that you function in, and you better have good governance for that, okay? So companies all started to do CSR reports. You can find this language anywhere within any company. Even academic institutions will have them, right? Like this isn't just a food industry thing. This is an industry-wide thing on practicing ethically as a company. When it was established, it was more looked at as compliance to some extent, right? And or reputation. You could build a better connection with your community. What's happening today is now it's becoming essential for our businesses. Supply chains, because of climate change, are getting shortened, and people are seeing PepsiCo, there's not going to be enough potatoes. That's a financial problem now, as much as it is an environmental problem. Same on the health side of it, right? The regulatory pressures, those front of pack labeling and those types of things are coming forward, and if you as a company aren't paying attention to what that means to your foods, that's going to be a big problem for you. And lastly, these Gen Zs are not dummies, man. They really expect companies to do more, and they want them to do more. So no longer really is ESG something that companies just have to do or do as a report on the side, but it's now becoming something that will enable them to actually be a sustainable business. Now, the thing is, not all companies are at the same place. Structurally, from their CEO to who runs sustainability to who runs nutrition to who runs whatever. And that's where there's kind of coming some confusion, unfortunately. So the more that organizations can start to think about this shift and build it into their day-to-day choices, the more I think we're actually going to see some of these positive metrics and initiatives that I was showing you become even more clear on the outcomes. So a few goodies that I just think are doing this awesome. There's this group called the Nutrient Density Alliance. They're small. They're not very big at all. But what I love, love, love about what they're doing is in their purpose. It says, our purpose is to ignite awareness and action around nutrient density to drive demand for regenerative food systems. You ask any consumer, they're going to tell you that they would like food that is, from better soil, or they would like food in 100% recycled packaging. You take them to the store, they don't end up buying it. That's not compelling for them to actually make the purchase, even though they desire it. What this group's trying to do is help figure out how do we actually link these two areas of health and the environment together to make it more compelling for the consumer to be paying attention to it and driving additional costs that'll enable us to do that, right? So really interesting group that I think is tying both environmental and nutrition elements, along with, I put policy on there because their real push is how do we get the right regulations to enable us to talk about it correctly. Another great group, Benson Hill, they're an ingredient supplier that we had. It's similar to Soline, right? There's some really good ingredient work happening that's looking at not only reducing their environmental impact. This is a soy flour that had 70% water usage, 50% lower emissions, and 20% higher protein. As well as the soybean oils actually had 20% less saturated fat. So we actually used this at the old Kellogg and Morningstar Farms. And what it enabled us was we didn't have to pass that cost on to the consumer. The Benson Hill had gotten it to the point that it wasn't a plus up that we then had to give to that shopper. So it was a win-win-win across all three. And those are the things we want to work with our ingredient partners to do more of. The last example I'll give you is How Good. So How Good is a software company. And what they have done really, really well is built a system that allows you at an ingredient level at a company. I mean, think about how many ingredients a company has. We have like thousands and thousands of ingredients. They have a system that can tell us all the way down to the farmer that sustainability background, okay? Here's where it gets cool though. They actually also have a software that my research and developer can put in the recipe, decide which fiber ingredient that they want that has the least amount of impact on soil, I'm making this up. But then they can also see how much more, like, does it have more soluble fiber? Because it has all of the nutritional qualities in there as well as all the environmental qualities in there. So technology like this is going to start to make this a lot easier too, because as manufacturers, it's going to put pressure on those ingredient companies to give us ingredients that are going to do both, because we're going to be able to see it right away, right? So that's my biggest challenge, guys, is getting this job as this well-being and sustainable business officer and relaunching, we call it a 117-year-old startup company of WK Kellogg Co. My job is to get out there and start telling people, connect. Can we get all the different experts in the room just to even inform the project? They don't have to be there the whole time, but you get that other expert in there to just give you something else to think about as you're designing whatever research you might be doing. Get diverse coalitions. Again, same thing. Even if it's just to have a consultant as part of that coalition, but get those different thinkers in there, because I guarantee you it'll make it better. And then measure, measure, measure. You don't always have to think of these metrics from the other pillars, right, as strong indicators of success. It's more about just make sure you're measuring it to make sure nothing unintended is happening, and or maybe find an opportunity. So that's all I have today. So I'll pass it over. I think we'll do some more questions. Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I was very interested. This is Anna San Gabriel from Ajinomoto, Japan. Is this more than just a question, it's a comment. And I think that most of the companies on the coalitions that you show, they are American, European companies. So representing Asian companies, I would say that we have a very different food culture. So our products reflect that. And probably we do sell different products and more in the image of cooking that still is very strong in Asia, supporting, still consumers going to cook by themselves and using seasonings. And for us, taste is also really important to have the local taste of all the very diverse Asian culture. So I wonder, there will be, I think we still need to have a stronger effort to, have a more global collaboration, including many different ways of thinking about foods. And because for us, the Western food products are quite different. And so just the comment. Yeah.
Oh, good comment too. And WBCSD, right, the World Business Society or Sustainable Business Group, I always forget those letters. They might be another group, though, to tap into that you might be able to get stronger partnership there. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Sarah. I'm over here.
Oh, there you are.
I'm Louise Dye from Leeds. I wanted to bring you back to regenerative agriculture, if I may. So a number of cereal companies are trying to aim to have, I don't know, a certain percentage of their wheat or whatever produced through regen ag practices by a certain deadline. Yep. And I'm guessing that you're going down that same route as well.
Yeah, we will, yeah.
Yeah.
So just so you have perspective, Kellogg had previous commitments as a global organization. WK Kellogg Co. is looking into how ours should look now that we are just Canada and the US.
Yeah, but what I wanted to come back to was, I know you pointed out Unilever, but we've been working with farmers in the UK and actually asking them about their regen ag practices. And actually, a lot of the farmers don't know that what they are doing is regenerative agriculture.
Yes. I know.
Yeah, they do what their dad did or what their granddad did because that's what gave the better yield.
Right.
And at the moment, I think one of the drivers in an agricultural sense is you do what's tried and tested. You will only change a farmer's behaviour if you're going to hit his pocket in a positive way. If it's going to be negative, they won't do it. So there's a whole load of behaviour change that has to happen there. But also, a lot of those practices that they have done for years are actually quite soil friendly. And it's some of the drivers for higher yield that have moved them away from and we're going to hear about soil this afternoon if everybody can stay awake and have some coffee in a minute. Yeah. But, you know, it's about changing people's behaviour, isn't it? And then and some of the drivers have to come from big industry because they say we want products that come from that process. But it's also about growing for quality, not just for yield.
Agreed.
And I kind of wondered where you stood on that.
Yeah, so I'm 100% on quality. So one thing I'll call out, those metrics that SAI laid out, what I did like about them was there was metrics, but it was outcome based. So if a farmer is getting that outcome without, you know, with a slightly different approach for that region, then they should continue doing that, right? Like, you shouldn't be forced to do a certain practice as long as you're at that same sustainable outcome, right? Quality is what's missing in my mind, right? I would say, so PepsiCo's oat program was looking at nutritional quality there, but I wouldn't say that all of them do that, and it wasn't called out as one of the core outcome metrics from the SAI, so.
I think that I am the last one. Yes, yes. Well, first of all, congratulations for your talk. And my name is Anya. I'm from ILSI Mesoamerica, and I am very interested that you and other companies as you mentioned before, in that alliance, be part of our projects in Latin America, especially about sustainability. But this year we will be doing scientific publications about best practices in water and food sustainability actions, and I think that, well, will be our first publications, but I think that could be for all the Latin American a very good opportunity to share all that you are talking about.
Yeah, so Latin America went with Kellanova. I'm sorry, guys, I'm not global anymore. But I will connect you with Ana Silvia Gonzalez. She's kind of the me down there, and she's phenomenal. It would be a good.
Well, the Caribbean is mine, so
Okay.
would you?
Oh, we can talk about that maybe later.
Hi, maybe one more, maybe?
One more.
So this is Kerr Dow from ILSI and also formerly from Cargill. And first of all, I want to compliment you on an excellent presentation. And actually, I think you helped clarify what a lot of people have been asking about over the last couple of days, because people have approached me to talk about what companies are doing in this field. And I think that a comment first, it's perfectly natural in industry that the companies have been focusing on things like land management and water and energy and carbon emissions and all those things which really companies have a big impact on because of the scale of operations, as you very clearly pointed out. So the question coming up, which thank you for bringing it, is that nutrition and food safety is rarely in the discussion. And often the chief sustainability officer does not have a background in those areas. They tend to come from operations or from some other area. So, I've really, I guess, a question and a request. I mean, the question would be: do you see a change, and do you see perhaps people like yourself with that kind of background could become a champion amongst your industry peers and with the other sustainability officers? Are you doing anything to try and promote that? And then the second, maybe final comment would be, I think ILSI sees itself as having potentially a very important role in this. We have a new climate initiative going through, and food safety and nutrition is something that I think, as you pointed out, bringing together experts together in other fields to address this. I think ILSI could play a role in that area, and I'd be curious in how you feel about that.
Yeah,
thank you.
I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like we should advocate for that. I'll be totally honest. Kellogg was very segmented prior to the split. We had a chief sustainability officer, we had a philanthropic team, and we had a nutrition group, all with different senior leaders, all with different priorities. That's very difficult to create the connections, and to an R&D developer, which one do they prioritize, right? Or a marketer. So my CEO, love him to death. I voiced that concern to him, and that's why he created my role. And what I will say is the reaction has been awesome. So I am not a sustainability expert, by no means. I have a phenomenal soil expert. I have a phenomenal plant expert that knows everything about GHG. So I don't need to know that. What I need to know is, how am I making sure I see an indicator across all of those and asking the right questions? So that's, I think, the shift that we're seeing, but I'm seeing it already come through. I'm not the first. You know what I mean? I might be the first that got the title, but that's about it. People have been thinking about this, and they're starting to now integrate it within their organizations.